Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low magazine? Because 4Low magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, we have Chris Overacker. Chris is a guy that's been in the four-wheel drive industry for quite a while. We'll get into all of that, but he has started a bunch of different companies in the off-road world, and we're going to talk to Chris about all that. So, Chris, thank you so much for coming on board and being part of Conversations with Big Rich.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's going to be fun to share.
Yeah, I think so. So, your name first came up with Jack Bettio, one of the other interviews that I did, East Coast competitor, and he bought a white vehicle from you. I think it was a CJ7 or something.
Yes, it was.
Okay, well, before we dive all into that, let's start at the beginning. And where were you born and raised?
Well, I was born in San Jose, California in '59.
Okay. And
didn't spend a lot of time there. Was my folks moved to Colorado in, I think, 64. Yeah, 64. So I was just a little tot then, but I would like to consider Colorado kind of my home stomping ground, even though I've lived in New Mexico for a bit. But anyway, I moved to Colorado Springs in 64 and then just learned to love the Rockies and skiing and backpacking and everything Colorado had to offer.
So Colorado Springs, the home of the Air Force Academy.
Yep, absolutely.
Was your parents moved there just to get out of California, or was it work related?
Well, my dad worked for Hewlett-Packard, and they had a plant in Colorado Springs, and he transferred there as an electrical engineer. And he jumped at the opportunity to get out of California and moved to a state that was known for its outdoor activities. So he really encouraged the whole family to go along with that. And I guess my brother at the time was, he's 4.5 years older than I. So he was all for it, and I was obviously for it. So it's like, yeah, let's go to Colorado.
Oh, awesome. And you said you were born in San Jose. I was born in the North Bay, up in the San Bruno, Burlingame areas where I was born, but I was raised in San Bruno, California. But I spent through my high school years there.
I see. Well, I don't remember it much, obviously, but I sure admire that state and everything they've done for our industry.
Yes, true. Too bad now they're, we won't get into political stuff. Anyway, almost everybody knows how I feel about that.
Right.
I'm no longer a guest of their situation in California, so I'm glad to have escaped. But
sure.
Anyway, we find yourself in Colorado Springs at the age of about 5 years old.
Yeah, I moved there at about 5, and like I said, we were. My dad had me on snow skis at about that age, and we really, matter of fact, he volunteered on the ski patrol at a couple of different ski areas. So we would head out to go skiing almost every weekend. And matter of fact, I can remember one time we were heading back, and I was all proud of myself. I said, "Dad, I didn't fall down once today." And he kind of looked at the rearview mirror at me and looked at me and said, "Well, you must not be trying very hard." So I kind of burst my bubble, but it was a good lesson, and it's kind of stayed with me.
I always had that same attitude, and it didn't, and it's, you can't have great success without some failures.
Right, exactly. So anyway, we did that in the winter times, and we did a lot of hiking and backpacking as youngsters, and we just really learned to love the outdoors and everything that entailed. And obviously, I was kind of growing up through elementary school there, and some of my friends would have mini bikes or go-karts, and I thought, wow, those are fun, and I'd get to ride them every now and then, or go out to the local parking lot with them and romp around. And I kept bugging my dad, I want a mini bike, I want a go-kart, whatever. He was not really for it at all. He wasn't totally closed-minded, but it was always just a kind of a subtle no. So I was kind of disappointed in that, but that's just the way it was. So anyway, I think it was about 1969 or 1970, somewhere in there, my dad got offered a job in Albuquerque, New Mexico with Hewlett Packard, but with a different division. He was going to go into sales. And so we all talked about it, and we all packed up and headed down to Albuquerque from Colorado Springs. So we got there, and I think it was probably late 69 or 70. And my folks bought a home that was in the northeast foothills, not really in the town of Albuquerque, but kind of near the foothills, but still near a lot of the desert, and kind of rural, but still close to town, if you know what I mean.
Right.
And it was just a wonderful place to grow up. There was all kinds of boys my age and my brother's age that we would hang out with, and we got to ride the bus to school. We were the first ones on the bus and the last ones off, and we'd sit in the back of the bus and be rather mischievous, if you will, but typical boys, and there again, a lot of my friends out there had dirt bikes, and it was to the point where my dad finally had to give in and bought us a couple of dirt bikes, and he actually got into it as well. And next thing you know, it was my brother and I and my dad out riding dirt bikes in the desert and exploring all the terrain. So that's where I kind of got my start in the off-road world, was riding dirt bikes in the desert.
So then I would take it that while you were in school, you were more of a do it your own way, do your own thing, instead of scholastic or athletic.
Yeah, absolutely. I was an okay student. I think most of my problem was I just probably didn't apply myself as much as I should have. But at the same time, it just didn't really interest me a whole lot. And, the scholastic stuff, English and math and science, and what am I going to use that for? But I'll tell you what, when I got into high school in ninth grade, I signed up for Metals Shop. They had Metals 1 and Metals 2 for your junior and sophomore year. And I found the light. I mean, this metal shop was set up. It had, welding booths, and you could learn how to MIG weld and TIG weld and stick weld. And they had a milling machine in there, just a manual Bridgeport. They had a lathe. They had a foundry. You could cast aluminum. Had a sheet metal shop. You could build little toolboxes and stuff. It was like, this is it. I know right now this is where I'm going, because this is fun.
So what were some of the projects that you remember building?
Oh, I built a couple of little sheet metal toolboxes. I gave one to, this is funny, gave one to my grandmother in California, my dad's mom. And when she passed away, I got that back, so I still have that. It's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
I made a little dustpan for somebody on sheet metal, and let's see, welding projects. I remember one of the projects we had to do was to take some, I think it was like 1/8 or 3/16 thick steel, like little cubes, and you had to weld it into a square box, and then it had to float. So it had to be airtight. And if it didn't float, then you got to go do it again until it floated. So
wow.
That was fun. And in the foundry, I think I cast a little ashtray. Never did smoke, but I got an aluminum ashtray that I made in the foundry. But they had a project for the lathe where you could take a piece of bar stock and you had to turn down different sizes and make a taper, and then put some knurls on one end, and so you kind of got the basics of how to do a lathe and how to read blueprints and how to follow those blueprints, and just all kinds of cool little projects like that.
Well, that's awesome. And that was in high school.
Correct. That was in 9th and 10th grade in high school. And meanwhile, we were still riding dirt bikes and having fun, and I was working on dirt bikes and learning to wrench on them because we were out using them and had to maintain them, and that was interesting as well. And then let's see, I got my grandfather gave me his 46 Willys CJ2A, and I think we got that between my sophomore and junior year in high school. We drove out to California and towed this Jeep back, and it had been rode hard and put up wet, and it was in good shape, but it needed a lot of tender, loving care. So that was going to be my daily driver, and I started driving that Jeep and started learning in a hurry that you had to work on that to keep it going. And
constantly.
yeah. And so I kind of learned in a hurry that was what you had to do. So there was lots of four-wheel drive shops in Albuquerque, but one in particular was named Lee Sharp Four-Wheel Drive Center. And Lee specialized in replacement parts for Jeeps. He didn't really have a lot of accessories. Matter of fact, he was old school. He didn't have any accessories, maybe a floor mat or something, but he had Jeep parts, and he worked on all kinds of 4x4 vehicles. Well, I got to know him right away because he had wheel bearing parts and brake parts, and he had all the replacement parts that I needed for that old Jeep. Matter of fact, one funny story is it was time to rebuild the old T90 transmission, and I talked to Lee. He goes, "Yeah, I got parts for that, no problem." So I got some advice and went home, and in my garage, I took the thing out and I think used a floor jack or something dumb and got the transfer case, split it off, and got it all apart. And I put all the parts in a box and took it down to Lee, and he looked at it and he fixed me up with all the different parts I needed and gave me some more advice. And I went home and stumbled through it and got it all rebuilt. And I thought to myself, before I put this back in, I better take it down to Lee and have him take a look at it just to make sure that that's right, So I put the transmission in a box, and I use my dad's truck, and I go down there and I put it up on his bench, and he comes out and he looks at it, and he looks down inside the top cover's removed, and he looks at it, looks at me and said, "Looks good." Like 5 seconds. And I'm like, "You didn't even shift any or move any sliders or turn the input shaft or nothing." So, okay, well, he said it's good. So I went home and I bolted the transfer case back on it, and I put it all back up in the Jeep, and I got ready to put the top shift cover on it. It just felt kind of weird, and I had to kind of move it around, and I kind of maybe forced a little bit. I mean, I had silicone on the gaskets, and it went on there. I put the floor pan back in, and I put my makeshift carpet back in it, and I filled it with oil and pushed the clutch in, started up the old L head, and let the clutch out, and it just stalled the engine like right now. Like, what? And it wouldn't shift right. Well, come to find out, it was locked in 2 gears at one time.
Oh.
And, well, so I figured that out and took it all back apart and turned the second, third synchro thing around or slider around and put it all back together, and worked fine. Boy, I got in that Jeep and I went down to Lee and I said, "How come you didn't tell me that slider was in there backwards?" He started laughing and carrying on. He goes, "Chris, if I'd have told you that was in there backwards, you'd have never learned a thing. I can guarantee you'll never do that again."
that whole thing about a little bit of failure.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a lesson. To this day, I still know which way that goes in the T90.
It's a lot of the guys I've talked to, they say they held the flashlight for their fathers. And,
okay.
And the whole thing is that, you're a young kid, you're really not paying attention to maybe what dad is doing. You don't even have the light in the right spot, but you learn after, a few episodes of that, you hold that light so that they can see, so you don't get told you're doing it wrong.
Absolutely. My dad was really good at coaching me, and, well, I said more hands-on and telling me that that's what I needed to do, but letting me do it a lot of the times on that Willie. Like, for instance, I remember taking the rear axle shaft up. I had a bad bearing or something, and there was all these, I called them metal gaskets. "What's with these metal gaskets, Dad?" He goes, "Well, let's talk about that." He goes, "Those are shims, and those are used to set the end plate." "Oh, okay." And there's different thicknesses, but he'd let me do it. He'd let me figure it out, and it was probably one thing that set me up for the future.
Yeah, my dad was a hot rodder, and had built dragsters, basically drag racers, and
okay.
my first vehicle was a '54 Volkswagen Bug, and I got that
Okay.
before I was 16. So I had the chance to tear it apart, build it up, bought a
You
couple of
bet.
other Bugs to grab parts off of, that kind of thing, and it was amazing. I was the oldest of all my friends. They were, we were all within 8 or 9 months of each other, but I got
Okay.
my car running first, and it was amazing. By the time we all got out of high school, most of us had Volkswagens,
Okay.
and it was
Neat.
because I was the one that could work on them, and so they had somebody that could coach them. My dad was around more, because of either marital situations or just because of jobs. And my dad
Sure.
was a tool and die maker and machinist, and had been
Excellent.
into racing and had motors, and that was in his blood, where the other dads didn't have that. So our house was the house that everybody came over to work at. So our
Perfect.
driveway was always dirty. The garage was always kind of a mess because kids never put things away. And then, of course,
Exactly.
him being a tool and die maker, that was a machinist. That was like a no first off. But
Sure.
I learned a lot from him that way, and then I was able to help the friends of mine that were basically the same age. So that was a good lesson for me, but also for those friends of mine that I still have today. So it's pretty cool.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a really neat story.
So from that Willys, where did you go from there? Did you have that flat fender all the way through high school?
Oh yeah, and even beyond. But
Good.
kind of a little more story about that era.
Okay.
I really showed this interest in working with metal, and my dad saw that, and I think it was the summer between metals 1 and 2, which would have been the summer between junior and sophomore year. My dad bought me a oxacetylene welding setup, and we made a kind of a welding bench in the garage, and I started tinkering with projects, and next thing you know, my friends discovered that I had this, and they'd bring their broken bike frames over, their lawn mowers or whatever, and I was welding up everything I could get my hands on, and really learning all about how expensive consumables are, and that my buddies are kind of taking advantage of this. And so I finally made a little sign and put it up on the back of my bench, said, all welding chores, $5 or whatever it was, I don't remember, and they were like, "What's this for?" I said, "Well, this stuff costs money." And so that was kind of probably set me up a little bit for thinking about the future. So that was a neat experience in my life. And about that time, all the dirt bike things started to kind of fade away, and I got more into the Jeeping thing, and a lot of my friends had Jeeps. So it kind of all molded into the dirt bike world, went more into playing with off-road vehicles out in the desert and the northern mountains in New Mexico. We'd go up there, go camping, and this Jeeping thing was pretty fun. So let's see, in my junior year of high school, I took auto shop, and there was an auto shop too for the senior year. Well, now all of a sudden, all the welding and fabricating stuff could come into working on cars and working on Jeeps, and now my friends were discovering that, well, these Jeeps break pretty easy, so now we're fixing these up and we're working on them, and we're same thing in the driveway and kind of doing all of the repairs, and everybody's kind of hanging out at my place because I had all the tools and some of the knowledge and a lot of the ambition to do it. So that's what we were doing in high school. So that was a really, really fun part of my life.
That's awesome. That is a great foundation for where you've taken the next steps.
Yeah, and then there was several students in the auto shop that decided we need to go to that Denver Automotive and Diesel College. They had a sales rep they sent down, and I thought, that sounds like a great idea. Let's get out of this town. Let's go to Denver and let's go to school. So let's see, that graduated in 77. So that same year, September of 77, we all went to Denver, and I went to Denver Automotive and Diesel College. I actually worked during the days from 8 to 5 at a place called Trailerland. I was the lot boy, and then went to school at night from 6 to 10:30. So put myself through school doing that, and that was a year-long course. And after I graduated in 78, it was like, yeah, I don't really want to hang around here. It's kind of cold up here in big city. And so I moved back to Albuquerque, and still had the Willys Jeep. It was kind of it was doing okay, but it was kind of getting tired again. And I think I got a Chevy truck or something. I can't remember what I had, but I got the Willys back to Albuquerque, and it was time to find a job. So I didn't know what to do, just kind of graduated, goofed off for a little bit. And my buddy was working at Kmart Auto Center, so he got me a job there doing tires and batteries. And I thought, this is not really what I want to do. So I did that for about a month, and then lo and behold, get a phone call from Lee Sharp at Lee Sharp Four-Wheel Drive Center.
Nice.
And he had kind of watched me and kind of coached me with all my Jeep and stuff, and he knew that I'd gone to school, and he said, why don't you come on down here and we'll kind of see if we can get you going and working in the back as a mechanic's helper. And I did that and loved it. And there was some other good guys there. There was a mechanic there. I don't remember his name, but he kind of took me under his wing and was showing me all kinds of stuff. And next thing you know, he got another job offer and quit. And I'd only been there for probably, I don't know, less than a year, maybe 6 months or so. Next thing you know, I'm one of the lead mechanics at Lee Sharp's, and I've got all the very little experience, but Lee put me in charge and said, go for it. And boy, we were setting up gears, and we were doing transmissions and clutches, and you name it, we were doing it in that shop, and it was just a lot of fun. Learned a lot. Lee Sharp was a fantastic mentor and took me under his wing and showed me how to do not only the mechanic stuff in the back, but next thing you know, he had me up front answering the phones and dealing with customers, and then he had me ordering parts, and then he had me doing bank deposits, and next thing you know, he's going on vacation, said, here's the keys, you run it. And I'm like, whoa. And I mean, we're only into it like a year and a half, 2 years now, and I'm overwhelmed at all this responsibility, but at the same time, I'm just soaking it up like a sponge, and just loving it. So that went on for, I'm guessing probably 3 or 4 years or so. And then Lee decided he was kind of he was older at that time. I'm guessing he was in his mid 60s. And some guy came around wanting to buy the business. And it turns out it was a guy from California by the name of George Adler. And Four Wheel Parts Wholesalers bought out Lee Sharp and moved in a Four Wheel Parts Wholesalers in this location in southern Albuquerque there. So next thing you know, I'm working for George and working for this big corporation, and George is back in California running his whole show back there, and it's like we're the black sheep out here in Albuquerque. It's his first venture outside of California, and it was all good. There's no bad days there, but it was just a big corporation, and I missed working for Lee, and I was kind of frustrated, and paychecks would show up late. It was just like, just different. And I'd been, meanwhile, my parents moved back to Colorado. They moved to Littleton. My dad got another job with Hewlett Packard and in some other division, and they moved, and I was in Albuquerque with just all my friends and assistant manager at Four Wheel Parts, and kind of frustrated, not quite sure where I wanted to go, but I was in the field that I wanted to be in. So my dad calls me on the phone one day, and we're talking, and he goes, well, why don't we start our own four-wheel drive shop in Colorado? I'm like, that sounds like a neat idea. So long story short, I moved to Littleton, where they were living, which is just a suburb outside of Denver, and moved in with my parents again and moved all my stuff up into the garage. And then I went on a journey. I had to find a place in Colorado where we wanted to start a business that we could enjoy all of the cool things that Colorado had to offer, the mountains and the four-wheeling and the skiing and all the cool stuff that's out there. So I started scouting little towns, and we looked along the Front Range, and then we looked on the western slopes. See, Colorado's kind of divided into 2 states. There's the Front Ranges from Fort Collins all the way down to Pueblo, and then if you go east, it's the plains, and then they're right at the foothill of the Rocky Mountains, and you have to go through the Rocky Mountains to get over to God's country. That's the western slope, and that's where we live now, and that's where we started our business, in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, which is about 25 miles from Aspen. So
right, it's there at where the river goes up through the canyon.
Yep, right there where the Colorado meets the Roaring Fork. It's beautiful, and it's just a wonderful place to live. So my parents bought a place outside of town. It was the perfect setup. It was on about maybe not quite a half an acre, about 5 or 6 miles south of Glenwood Springs. towards Aspen, and it had a shop and a small house attached to it. So perfect. You don't have you can live right there and you can work there. It was an older place, kind of run down. I had to do a lot of fixing up and all that kind of stuff, but we did that, and I got it all outfitted to be a 4x4 shop and opened the doors as Stage West Offroad Outfitters in June of 1983.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Did everything alone for a while. Just couldn't afford to have any employees and didn't really think about it, and had to build up a clientele. And it was interesting moving into a small town where I was not from and didn't really know anybody, and trying to get accepted by the locals. But I persevered and worked hard and tried to get the word out there. And when I did get customers, I would treat them with respect and do a good quality work for them. And the word spread and just grew from there.
So let's talk about that portion, being accepted into the community and then trying to get the word out about what you were doing. How did you go about that? Was it just by word of mouth, or did you join any of the organizations in town like the Lions Club or Masonic Lodge or things like that to try to get more people to know who you were? What was your avenue to market?
Well, those are all very good questions, and I was new to this. I didn't really know how to market it. My dad and mom were living in Littleton, and he was working for Hewlett Packard and way up in management. And he'd come up on some weekends and help me with some things, but it was like, trial by fire. Here you go. So obviously I put up a sign on the side of the building, and I did that right after we bought the building so that it got the interest up. And it's a small town. Word spreads pretty fast, okay?
Right.
But one thing I did right away is there was another four-wheel drive shop in town called the Four Wheelers, and I befriended them right away and said, hey, I'm just here to kind of, do this whole thing together. I don't want to be competitors with you, but I'm here doing this thing. And they were very friendly and invited me to join the local four-wheel drive club.
Oh, perfect.
And the High Country Four Wheelers out of Glenwood Springs. And they'd been in existence for, 10 or 15 years when I got there in 83. And they immediately accepted me, and I kind of, jumped right in there and went four-wheeling on the trips. And next thing you know, we're organizing events like 4x4 rodeos or Jeep shows or doing poker runs. And it just kind of grew from there. And I didn't really do any advertising, to say the least. I mean, maybe a few direct mail things, but I never did any radio or any of that kind of stuff. So it just kind of word of mouth just spread. And it like I said, it was only a town of about 5,000 or 6,000 people. So it really kind of spread the word fast, but everybody kind of got to know me and knew that I was doing good work. And one thing that was pretty cool is that, kind of backing up a little bit, I've always kind of been into spectating desert races. That was always kind of a fun thing. Even back when I was working for Lee Sharp, he was kind of dabbled in the real estate business, and he knew Don Adams of the famed Class 3 racer. And Don was into real estate, and one time Don was hanging around Lee Sharp, and I recognized him and introduced myself and talked to him for probably about an hour about off-road racing and all that. So that kind of sparked that. And meanwhile, some friends and I would always spectate the Mint 400. We'd go out to the Mint every year. Sometimes we would go to the Parker 400 back then, and just really enjoyed doing all that. Well, meanwhile, back to Stage West, I started taking a bunch of buddies out to the Mint 400, and we'd go spectate that whole thing, and that was just a blast. And I always liked the look of pre-runners, and that whole fad was coming up strong. So, well, I figured I got to start something new up here in Glenwood Springs. So I bought a tube bender, an old Hausfield hydraulic tube bender, and started building bumpers and cages and shock hoops and Nerf bars and all kinds of stuff. And man, that fad hit Western Colorado like wildfire. And everybody had to have a pre-runner looking truck. And we were so busy building custom stuff and just going to town with that, and not to mention the day-to-day, water pumps and ringing pinions or clutches or whatever you're doing, but just fabricating and building stuff and having fun.
So by then, did you have employees?
I hired a good friend of mine that I'd met in Albuquerque named John Castro, and he moved up to Glenwood Springs and actually lived at that house with me. It was a several-bedroom house, and he had his own place, and we just we just worked pretty much 12 hours a day, and then and then would after that work on our own stuff. And so I had him as an employee for quite a while, and then I think that was it. And then after he worked there for 4 or 5 years, and then moved back to Albuquerque. But I think I had one or two other employees after that.
Okay.
But it was pretty much a small business for the extent of the time that I owned it.
And how many years was that? So you figure 83, 84 was the start of Stage West?
Yeah, 83 was when I started, and I think I sold it in like 94 or 95 after I'd started Mountain Off-Road.
Okay.
But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself there because we're building all this cool stuff at Stage West, and it was mostly necessity. For instance, we were starting to do things like shackle reversals because we wanted to go faster with these old leaf-sprung vehicles, so we'd put the shackles behind the front axle, and then we'd start breaking frames, and we'd build frame reinforcing plates, and we wanted to get more clearance underneath with flat cross members, so we'd clock the transfer cases up, and then we'd need a 1-inch body lift to clear that. And we're building all these one-off parts and building all these cool Jeeps to go play, and we were breaking them, and we were just trying to build them better and breaking motor mounts and trying to build those better, and just you name it. So all of the stuff that we were building as a one-off, I finally said, there's probably a market for this stuff. And meanwhile, we'd been going out to Jeep Safari out in Moab, which is only about 3 hours from where we lived in Glenwood Springs. And I can't remember which magazine article writer. I think it was Mark Workmeister, who used to write for Four Wheel Drive and Sport Utility.
Yep.
Okay. He saw one, and then he called me later and said, "Hey, is that something you can send me?" I don't know. He lived out of state. And I got to thinking, wow, we just kind of build these and weld them on, but could I make this product bolt on? Okay, so I started engineering it and kind of figuring it out. So I built one, and he had bolts on, and well, now I got to send this to him. So now I better write instructions. Okay, so I have to figure out how that works and write all these instructions out and maybe take some pictures of it. And so my very first shackle reversal kit, while I still owned Stage West, went to Mark Workmeister, and then he installed it on his Project Scrambler and wrote an article about it. And I'm like, wow, this could be something. And next thing you know, we were trying to build more of these things one off just out of a little bitty shop with an old, Harbor Freight type bandsaw and stuff. And it was obvious it was going somewhere, but I didn't quite know where. And I was talking to my accountant one day, and he said, "Chris, why don't you export product and import money?" I thought, yeah, that sounds like a good plan, this mail orders thing. So I had an employee at Stage West at the time who was interested in buying it. So I'd already kind of started doing this mountain off-road thing and started selling a few things. So I thought, yeah, let's do that. So I sold the business to Joel Snyder and started Mountain Off-Road Enterprises. And next thing you know, we're in the manufacturing and mail order business.
That's awesome.
It just kind of all evolved. It wasn't really planned. It was just like, okay, next step. Okay, well, let's just do this now. And so I moved to Rifle, Colorado, which is about 25 miles west of Glenwood Springs, right on I-70, and rented a shop there, and started coming out with more products and my first catalog, and then we would mail catalogs out by the dozens, and the phone would start ringing, and we're just building products. And next thing you know, I'm hiring more people, and we're buying more equipment, and it's just incredible how fast that moved. That was probably in, like I said, 94, 95-ish range. And, we'd go out to Jeep Safari, Easter Jeep Safari in Moab, and set up a display and sell stuff out there. And All for Fun Week was sponsored by, I think, Mile High Jeep Club out of Denver. They have a big a fun day that they had a display where, all the vendors would set up a display at, and we'd do that. And I actually went out to Sierra Trek one year and showed all my stuff out there. Yeah, it was fun. It happened fast.
That's pretty cool. And it was all just because you were building your own stuff, and somebody said, "Hey, can you build this for me?" and created a market.
Exactly. That pretty much sums it up. It's not like I planned on going into the mail order business, but it just sort of happened. And there was lots of different products that just kind of evolved from going on a lot of different Jeep trips on a lot of different areas and seeing what vehicles needed and seeing what broke and seeing where you could improve them. And even some things were, working with other manufacturers. For instance, we came out with what we call bomb-proof motor mounts. Well, that all stemmed from back in the off-road racing spectating days. You'd go to the Mint 400 and you'd look at, you'd be on contingency and tech row and all the vendors are set up. And there was a guy there named John, I don't remember his last name, from AutoFab. And he had these urethane motor mounts for race trucks that would replace the stock rubber mounts. And those look pretty cool. Well, Jeeps have a real big problem with breaking the motor mounts, and especially on the 6-cylinders, when the rubber mount breaks, the metal comes down and punctures the oil filter, and now you're walking. So I thought, I wonder if he could build Jeep motor mounts. This is, back in Stage West days. And I talked to John, and he said, yeah, I think so. Build me up some fixtures, and I'll mail it to me, and I'll come up with something. And we worked back and forth 2 or 3 times, and he finally had it nailed. And we probably bought dozens of those motor mounts from John and put them on every Jeep that we could think of because they all needed it. So little did I even know back in the early days of Stage West, we were going to be manufacturing and mail ordering motor mounts. And next thing you know, that was a big product for mountain off-road. Matter of fact, I continued to buy those 6-cylinder mounts from John, and I engineered and built some other mounts for V8s and Chevy conversions in Jeeps. And then the Wranglers came along, and we did 6-cylinder mounts, and we were building all kinds of different things to reinforce the frames on those old weak Jeeps. And we were building 1-inch body lift pucks and sending out. It's amazing how you could take a piece of 2-inch diameter aluminum, cut it into a 1-inch long puck and drill a hole in it and put 11 in a kit and sell it with a bunch of bolts for $80, and you got $30 in it, And we were selling dozens of those a day. It was incredible how many body lifts were going out of there. And I think it was Phil Howell from one of the magazines did an article on the 1-inch body lift pucks, and next thing you know, they're flying off the shelf. And David Freiberger did an article on the shackle reversal and some shock hoops we were building and some other stuff. And he brought his Jeep out to Glenwood Springs from California, and we did a bunch of stuff. And he goes, "Do you want ink or money?" I said, "Ink." Okay, so he wrote a bunch of articles. And that's back in the, computers just coming into vogue, and the internet was just kind of there, but everybody still had to have all the different 4-wheel drive magazines and publications, and couldn't wait for the next issue to come out, and we were getting 1 and 2 and 3-part series on some of the different products we had, and we're going. And turns out that the magazine editors were just as hungry for new things to write about as we were for getting our stuff noticed and out there. So it was a kind of a win-win.
It's true, and it's still that way, even though there's less magazines. The big magazine groups have, they've quit producing the magazines basically. They're down to one, but
right.
they're still like our magazine, For Low, and then John Herrick's Crawl magazine, and we're still looking, or interested in getting parts and being able to do our tech articles about those parts and everything. So it's still viable out there. It's just a different market. I know a lot of people are internet now, but it is still, there's enough of us old school guys that like paper, and even some of the younger guys who grew up with computers and buying everything online are starting to turn to paper, just like they're going back to vinyl records and tape cassettes and stuff like that, because there's value in that. It's, what you have in the internet, you got to keep finding, where that magazine stack that sits next to your workbench or your favorite chair is right there at your fingertips.
Exactly. I really miss the days where the mail would show up and you'd go to the mailbox. All right, I got a new issue. That was always so much fun to go through that cover to cover.
Yep. Absolutely. So then, what was your first product that you built, say at Stage West, or the first thing you started selling to other people? Was it that shackle reversal kit or the body
I would
lifts?
say that was probably one of the first things we did to the Jeeps to make them perform better was the shackle reversal. But before that, probably making the motor mounts better, because Jeeps were just never known for their ability to hold the motor in place. And they would not only flop all over, and then that would cause the clutch linkage to come disengaged and you'd lose the clutch, or the fan would go through the radiator, or the oil filter would get punctured, or it would just generally fall down until the metal brackets hit, and it just was bad. They just didn't have very good mounts back in the day.
I can remember all my old Jeeps. I had the regular motor mount, factory motor mount, and then I put in a chain as like a limiting strap for the engine, so it wouldn't over torque.
Absolutely. Yep. We did that too, but that was just kind of a Band-Aid for the whole problem. So when we finally got hooked up with John at AutoFab and we started going with what we called the bomb-proof motor mounts, that just made the engine another cross member in the frame, and it gave everything stronger. And it did pick up some vibration, and you would definitely get a lot more rigid feel out of the Jeep, but boy, it sure eliminated a lot of the problems.
Right.
So the motor mounts probably came first, and then shackle reversals, and then Jeep frames are just known for their breakage. So we made these frame reinforcement plates that would go on the outside of the frame from the front bumper back to about the first body mount outrigger. And I had a cardboard template that we'd lay that out on a piece of 3/16 steel, and then you'd trace it out and torch it out by hand and grind it all down and then put it in the drill press and drill all the different holes needed for motor mounts or for shocks or for brake lines or whatever. And that's how we build frame plates, and we just did those one-off for a long time. Matter of fact, even when I started mountain off-road, I was still building frame plates that way, and finally I got sick and tired of drilling holes in them. So Pat Gramillion from Pole Pal was just up the street in Carbondale. He said, well, come on up here and use my iron worker. And I said, iron worker? What a cool concept. So I dragged these frame plates up to his shop and sit down on a bench and sit on it and then just punch these holes out in this way cool iron worker. I thought, what a cool thing. I got to have one of these. So next thing you know, I bought an iron worker. So it's just funny how things evolve because of necessity.
Right. So let's talk more about then. The bomb-proof motor mounts, spring or shackle reversal kits, frame rails. Were you still doing the two bumpers? What other products did you start with?
Well, after we got going with those basics, started hooking up with other companies that made longer brake lines. So we would sell brake lines to go with the more travel suspensions, with the shackle reversals and things. And then I wasn't actually building the bumpers in-house, but we got hooked up with a company in Denver that was doing a lot of our flame cutting, and they would build some bumpers for them. We did front and rear bumpers. We did bolt-in roll cages for CJs, YJs, and TJs. And the neat thing about that was they were all UPS shippable, and they would bolt in with no welding. Sold a bunch of those. We built heavy-duty steering box mounts because the steering box mounts on Jeeps was junk. So we'd make those out of half-inch thick steel, and the steering box braces. And we built spring-over axle conversion components because that was kind of big back in the day. And I'd made a cool little bracket that would bolt onto the passenger side knuckle of the newer Jeep Wrangler, the YJs, and not necessarily the TJ, but the YJ, when you did a spring over, the stock steering just didn't work. So I made this cool bracket that bolted onto the knuckle and would give you high steer, and with just simply bolting a bracket on and drilling in a couple of holes. So we sold a bunch of those. And with most Jeep, I'm kind of getting more into the Wrangler era now, but you know how they all came with a Dana 35 rear end, and that was obviously a problem.
Weak link.
And everybody was breaking those. So there's just got to be a better way. And sure, you could get a custom built Courier Dynatrac, but they were big bucks. Like, there's got to be another alternative. And one day I was at my buddy's shop here in Rifle, and he had just a home garage, and he was a technician at the Ford dealer, and I was snooping around his garage, and he had this rear end sitting there, and he was doing something with it. I thought, what's this out of? He goes, that's out of a Ford Explorer. What is it? It's a Ford 8.8. I got the tape measure out. Man, this is the same width as a Wrangler, within really close tolerances. But I said, and the same bolt pattern, and it's got disc brakes, and it looks heavy duty. He goes, yeah, it's really stout. So I said, where'd you get it? He goes, we got a whole pile of them out in the back of the dealer. I said, what? He said, yeah. He goes, they're warrantying a bunch of these for a bad squeak, and we got dozens of them back there. And he goes, you want some? I said, yeah. So I grabbed 4 or 5 of them and discovered that you take all the Explorer bracketry off the housing, and you could put some spring perches on, some shock mounts, and bam, it bolts right under a YJ or an XJ. And you got the bomb-proof rear end now compared to a Dana 35. And I put one in my own Wrangler, and sure enough, I got this squeaking noise from what they were talking about with the warranty issue. And it was really obnoxious. I thought, what is that? So I started digging into it. It turns out that the axle shafts are held in with C-clips, and they mismachined or stamped the C-clips wrong or something. It would allow the axle shaft to move a few thousandths of an inch from side to side, and then that would cause the brake rotor to rub up against the brake pads, barely, just enough to make this obnoxious squeaking noise. So I'd already set up a bunch of air lockers and different things, and I had all kinds of C-clips, so I'd pull the cover off, I'd change different C-clips and with some real thick ones. Noise went away. Okay, great. Now we got all these Ford rear ends we can use and no squeak, and they work good in Jeeps. And then we started building conversion kits for putting them in all the different Jeeps, and we even made all the bracketry to put those things under TJs, because they had, 10 or 11 different brackets for the coil springs and the link mounts and the sway bar and all the stuff. But we geared up and built all those brackets, and you could take all this stuff off the Ford 8.8 and weld all the TJ brackets on and have a heavy-duty rear end under your Jeep.
Nice. And almost an unlimited supply of 8.8s, huh?
Well, back in the day when there were so many Explorers around, I don't remember the years that they worked, like starting in early 90s up to 98 or 99 or something. There were just, how many Ford Explorers did they build, right? They were everywhere. And you could pick up a complete rear end in a junkyard for, a couple of $100 and buy our conversion kit for another couple of $100 and change gear ratios and put a locker in. And, for $1,500, you had an excellent rear end.
Awesome.
So, yeah, that worked good.
And Ford couldn't figure out that it needed a thicker.
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure they probably did. But meanwhile, there was piles of these things behind the local Ford dealer. I don't know how many of those I absconded with. I'm guessing probably 6 or 8 of them. And then that's all we really needed for our own stuff. But the word got out that was a thing to do, so people across the country would just go raid their local junkyards
and grab and then buy your kit. Perfect.
Exactly. But other than that, just typical Jeep parts in general. We had a pretty big catalog by the time I ended up selling that company, but it was, and still going strong, matter of fact.
So the whole entrepreneurship of building companies and then selling them, that wasn't intentional. It just happened that people would come along and say, hey, I'd really be interested in buying your company, and it was just the right time, or did you look at it that way?
Well, not really. When I sold Stage West, obviously I knew that mountain off-road was my next adventure, and I couldn't do both, and I was excited to get into that. With mountain off-road, I think I determined in about 2000, somewhere in there, that I really needed to expand. I was working out of a fairly small shop in Rifle, and we're just bursting at the seams. I needed to hire an engineer to get everything CAD drawn out, because I wasn't going to be the one to do that. I needed to take my manufacturing to bigger facilities that could handle more quantity of the raw materials that we would then weld together. I just wanted to expand. Well, at the time I was married to my first wife, and she was didn't want to move at all. She was happy here, and I was thinking Grand Junction, Colorado, about 60 miles to the west, or possibly even somewhere bigger, but wasn't going to move. And I figured, okay, we're going to be stuck here for a while, and that's good. So I sold Mountain Off-Road to an employee of mine, who then in turn did make it bigger. He kept it here in Rifle, but he built a new building for it and put in a bunch more equipment and hired more employees and that kind of thing. And So I didn't really retire at that point in time, but for 2 or 3 years, I just kind of goofed off. We had just built a house on some acreage just outside of Rifle, and I put up a shop and decided to kind of tinker and work on some friends' vehicles, and then customers started coming around. Next thing you know, it was kind of a job, and so I started Code 4x4, which was an acronym for Chris Overacker Design Enterprises. And it didn't really work too well out of a home shop because it was pretty rural, and if the weather was bad, UPS wouldn't deliver, and it just was not the thing. So I moved Code 4x4 into the downtown Rifle area and to a rented building that was much more suited for a business. And I ran that there from probably 2003 to I just sold it in January of this year, 2021.
Awesome. And any plans on starting another business, or are you just going to stay as an employee for someone?
Well, at this point in time, never say never, but I've been self-employed for a lot of years, and it had its challenges, and they were all good, but they were challenges. And in this environment today, with all of the rules and regulations and fees and different things and employees and all of the things that have to happen with being self-employed, I just decided I need to take a break from it for a while. So I'd sold Code 4x4 to a customer of mine, actually, who'd been a customer for several years, who's still running it here in Rifle. And I worked for him for a number of months. The plan was to work for him for quite a while. But in April of this year, he decided that he could probably do it on his own without me. So I found myself unemployed, and that was okay. This summer was coming up. I took kind of a break, and we really like going out and camping and goofing off. So I did that for a while. But then probably about July or so, I was like, yeah, I got to do something. I'm bored. So I hooked up with a past friend of mine who I'd known for years and years, named Stephen Watson, who owns a company called Off-Road Design. And I'm now working for him and enjoying it, and really looking forward to our new building, because he recently bought a building in Rifle on 35 acres, actually 2 buildings. And we're going to be moving everything from the Carbondale area down to Rifle here in a month or so. So I'll have no more commute, and I'm really looking forward to checking out the new digs.
Right. And so you went from more of Jeep-based to more of a full-size then.
Exactly, but I'm not really doing any thing important. I mean, it's very important, but I'm not doing any engineering or manufacturing. I'm just working in the warehouse and shipping and receiving, and learning a lot about his line of products. And it's all completely different, but all the same, because it's all, my background and what I've been doing really helps, because you're looking at this bracket. Okay, that fits onto a Dana 60, so that goes over here, and so it's just a whole new thing. But yet it's still very rewarding, because we're shipping a lot of product out of there. It's amazing how much stuff moves out of the shop we're at.
So a lot of the guys that, to backtrack a little bit in history, a lot of the guys that had shops or worked in shops got into the rock crawling events in the early days, whether that was what became Pro Rock or ARCA. Did you ever compete at all, or were you just in the shop end of it?
Well, interesting that you bring that up, because I never actually competed myself driving, but you can probably help me with these dates. There was I think they called it the Super Crawl, and it was in Farmington, New Mexico. I'm thinking 2000, 2001, maybe 2002. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, 2002, I think, was the first Super Crawl.
Okay. Well, the guy that I'd sold Stage West to, his name was Joel Snyder, and he had a fairly well-equipped Jeep YJ Wrangler, and he wanted to go do that. And he said, "Hey, Chris, you want to be my spotter?" I'm like, "Sure, let's go check this out." So we went and did that, and that was just an absolute blast. And I was absolutely amazed at where you could take these Jeeps. And that Farmington area that they had that Supercross set up in was ideal for an event. And there was some challenging obstacles in these full-body Jeeps, and that was a lot of fun. But I never really got into it competitively Um, Only because I was just so busy running a business. We did dabble back when we had Stage West. We dabbled in off-road racing a little bit since I'd been taking all these buddies of mine down to the mid 400 to spectate. One year, I think it was in '86, we decided that, hey, let's build a Jeep. Let's go race the mid 400. So one buddy donated his CJ7, and we parted out a Wagoneer and put the automatic tranny and the Quadra-Track and the Dana 44 axles under his CJ7, and we went racing. We raced the '87 Mint 400 in Class 3 and had a blast doing that, and didn't actually finish the race. We finished 3 of the 4 laps. We didn't break, but we just timed out because we weren't taking it as seriously as the big boys, but ended up good enough for 4th place in that class, even at 3 laps. But that was fun, and then we actually got hooked up with BF Goodrich and Team TA back then, as they called it. It was kind of a grassroots part of BF Goodrich to help small racers run their tires. And what's interesting is they were going to have an off-road driving school, and this was going to be in September of '87. So after our Mint race in '87, we signed up for this off-road driving school, and it was going to be in Denver, taught by Rod Hall and Steve Kelly of off-road racing fame. So heck yeah, we're going to sign up for this. And so we headed over and did that driving school, and it was a blast having not only bench racing with those guys, but learning from them. And a funny story is they rented Ford Broncos, brand new Ford Broncos, for this event for all of us students to drive around a course they made inside the horse racing track of a fairgrounds over there. I don't remember which one, but they had a small little track with some turns and jump setup. And here we got these rented Broncos, and we got Rod Hall or Steve Kelly sitting next to us saying, go, stop, turn, right, whatever. And we beat those Broncos to a pulp. Matter of fact, one of them, the rear bumper got bent on, and after the event was over, Rod Hall himself was underneath that Bronco trying to straighten out the bumper with the adjustment brackets. It was funny. He told a funny story in class too. He was talking about one of the races that he'd run in Dakar. I think it was Dakar. It was in Africa. And he had just hooked up with Dick Cepek on his own line of off-road lighting. So I think it was kind of a sales pitch for his lights too. But he was talking about how dark it was over there. And he'd come around a corner and goes, all I saw was black, just darkness. And he paused for me and goes, after he paused, he said, elephants absorb a lot of light. Yeah, that was pretty good. Yeah. But then right after that driving school was the one and only Hydra, which is High Desert Racing Association, Colorado 300. And it was in Craig, Colorado, which is about, hour and a half north of Rifle. So we had this race Jeep, and we had just got done with the Mint 400 and prepped it and went up to race the Craig 300 race. We didn't finish that one. We smoked the motor on the Jeep that race, but we all had a good time. Anyway, after that, I kind of discovered that racing and competition, whether it be off-road racing or rock crawling, it's really fun, and I'd love to do that, but it's expensive, and the desert isn't near Colorado, and I have a business to run, so I better concentrate on making money instead of spending it.
Well, there's a novel concept.
Because it was real easy to spend it when you're dabbling with racing or competition.
Shh, you're not supposed to tell anybody that. That's a secret.
Okay. I see. Yeah, I heard somebody once say it's easy to win $100 off-road racing if you start with $1 million.
Exactly. How to become a millionaire in off-road racing? Start with 2.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that's kind of the chronological order of what happened with me.
So let's discuss some of the people that you did work for or were customers. I know that Jack Bedio said that he bought a white Jeep from you with Stage 4. I guess that was he'd seen you in Moab or something, or seen the Jeep when he was there in that area, and then that's how he actually even got into off-road, was because of that Jeep. Was that a CJ7 or a YJ? Or
it was a CJ7, and I don't remember all the details on how he acquired it. I'm trying to think back. It was originally my dad's Jeep, and it started out as just a totally stock CJ7, and we kind of built it up as a company Jeep and did everything we could do to it and put a nice paint job on it and etc. And I think it was in Aspen, and I don't remember why, but Jack saw the Jeep in Aspen because he had
That's right. He has a house there. Yep.
He does, and I don't remember how all that came down, but I don't remember if he bought it directly from my dad or what. Anyway, he ended up with this wonderful Jeep, and he wanted to go use it. So I said, "Hey, great, let's take you to Moab. You know, it's close." So we drove down to Moab and spent the night in a motel and got up in the morning, and I took him to the bottom of Moab Rim Trail. And I said, "We're going up there." And he goes, "Up where?" I said, "There's a trail up there." "No." "Yeah, right up there, honest." And we started up that face of Moab Rim, and he just loved it. He just said, I've done all kinds of things in my life. I've been a pilot. I've done boats. I've done hot rods. He goes, "This is it." He just fell in love with the sport. And as does everybody, especially when they go to Moab. But it was just the rest is history, because he went on to totally love it and compete and be very successful at that as well. But that was the story with Jack. As for other customers, I don't remember any specific names, but that went on to be famous like that. But just built all kinds of different rigs. I mean, a lot of the rigs start out as our own. We fix them up and then sell them and then build another one, and just had a lot of fun doing it.
Excellent. So now I'm guessing that you're 62 then.
Yep.
And because I was born in 58, so the math was easy for me.
Okay.
And you're working for Stephen Watson, and you're married to your second wife. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
And living there in Rifle, and enjoying the outdoors and working. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we've discovered side by sides.
Yes.
I know that sometimes side by sides and Jeeps don't intermix, so we try and not go on Jeep trips with the side by side. Of course, I don't even own a Jeep anymore, embarrassingly enough. But back to the going fast with dirt bikes and playing in the desert. I love speed, and now that you can buy a machine that's got 24 inches of wheel travel and almost 200 horsepower and a warranty, it's like, how can you not go wrong? And we find ourselves out all the time on the side by side camping and trail riding with friends, and we've owned, since they side by side were invented back in, at least like the Polaris Razor back in about 2007 or 2008. I've owned 3 or 4 of them and probably logged almost 20,000 miles on these things, and just absolutely love it. So we like the camping and the Razor riding is what we're into.
And hopefully, it's my biggest complaint with side by sides, or the power sports side of the 4-wheel drive industry, is that it does give the guy that's never, or the family, the people that have never been off-road in anything else, the ability to jump right in off-road, and then they look at the commercials and everybody's zipping around and ripping around and through the creek beds, and not sticking to the trails and not understanding the etiquette around others.
I completely agree, and that is a problem.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I wish that the manufacturers would address, because I don't think it can come from anywhere else, because the people that are buying these machines are not necessarily in off-road clubs, or if they are clubs, of a bunch of guys that got together and they call themselves a UTV club, they're all in the same situation. They've never been taught the etiquette on trails.
Yeah, I agree. That is a problem, and I think that it's up to us as users to try and educate those people. And there's been times when we've been out and we've actually seen people doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and we'll actually try and have a word with them and tactfully say, hey, you got to slow down when you come up on some mountain bikers, or slow down and stop when you come up on horseback riders. And you have to ease up in camp, and you don't do donuts when you get back here and raise a bunch of dust, and just use common sense, because they're going to ruin it for all of us. And luckily I have a background in Jeeping, and I got taught all those proper things, and we definitely ride with respect out there. And when I say all the group of people that I ride with, we don't cause any other problems, and we pick up more trash than we go in with, and try and really promote the sport in a positive way. But yeah, you're right. There's lots of people out there that don't see it that way.
Right. And I hope that the users that are transferring, because there's a lot of guys that have either transitioned all the way completely from Jeeps or Toyotas, or the full-size street legal vehicles into the side-by-side market, that they will help with that with that training, and get people to understand the need to be more aware of their surroundings and what they're doing and staying on the trails. Otherwise, they're going to get just like what's happened in Moab now, where they're not welcome.
Yep. Exactly. That's exactly what's going to happen. And we see that problem more and more. And we have to band together as users to try and improve our image and get on a better rapport with everybody, because there's more and more users out there and less space to use them, and then that space gets overused and then closed down. So it's a real problem that we need to start addressing, because it's going to get shut down.
Right. That's Moab was one of that was pretty much the battleground to getting UTVs registered and licensed in Utah as recreational vehicles, and then being able to, as long as you're not on the interstates or the major highways, to make it legal. And now Moab has said, at least the city council, we don't want you. And
exactly.
So it's, where other places like Sand Hollow and the Hurricane St. George area, they're allowing it. But if the users aren't responsible, they're going to end up, it's going to go the same way, which would be a shame.
It really would. I agree.
Yeah,
but I'd
go ahead.
I'd like to maybe get back into Jeeping again someday. But more of a exploratory type of I don't want to use the term overlanding, because that's kind of overused. But as for the gung-ho rock crawling, if I had a go for it buggy, maybe that'd be different, but that'd be expensive to build. But I think it'd just be fun to get out and use the Jeep for exploring some terrain where you got a defroster and a heater.
I'm all about that.
Yeah, because there's been some trips on the side-by-side where it's been rather chilly. But I think that never say never. But I was so immersed into the Jeep market that I needed to do something different for a while, and that's why I've gone the way I have. But yeah, I'd like to get back into it.
Yeah, I've had flat fender. I have had a CJ5. I got into the unibody Jeeps with an XJ, and
Perfect.
There was the heat and the AC. Of course, the AC never worked very well for those in those XJs. I still own a beater that's the event. It's basically, we call it the wood stove, because it has great heat. Even when you don't have it turned on, and but it's impossible to drive on long trips in any kind of warm weather, because it gets to be like 150 inside the cab.
I take it that's generated from the drivetrain.
Yes, correct. As soon as I put the Atlas in.
Absolutely. Yep.
But
I can relate.
But now that we've, I love those vehicles because you can lock them up. You can have the ability to have air conditioning if you do it right. So we're having one built right now, a 98 with a V8 in it, and a Chevy engine swap, and so it's got the Chevy AC in it. And that was the main thing when we were talking to Novak, was like, okay, it has to have a working AC system. I don't care
Perfect.
if it
That'll be
even has a
great.
heater, but it better have AC.
That's great. You'll love it.
Yeah, and so that way we can tow our adventure trailer because we have a trailer that we had made by a guy named Rob Philandro out of Salt Lake City, who built this trailer. He's towed it behind his 4400 race car at over 90 miles an hour, and it's got a rooftop tent on it. We've got it built out with a toolbox where all the cooking stuff is in it. It's got a built-in shower on it. It runs 35s and
How fun. That sounds great.
Oh yeah. Now I'll be able to tow it with the V8 Jeep because the 6-cylinder just didn't like it.
Of course. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. So until that car is completed though, we're towing with the Raptor, which gives me more fun in the like when we go to the sand dunes like Glamis, but it's not on the trails.
Well, that's a big vehicle to take on trails.
Yes, it is. And that's
course,
why
I
the
don't
paint
know.
isn't as good as it was when I got it.
Well, that's good. Of course, working at Off-Road Design and seeing what some of these guys do with their full-size trucks, it's pretty amazing.
Yes, it is absolutely. Some of the guys with those big Suburbans and
Yeah.
it is. But then again, they're wheeling. They're not worried about the paint job. And
That's
overlanders or extreme campers, auto campers, that's what I like to call it. Is the guys are a little more concerned with the look of the vehicle. I'm not that way. But
come on, you got to have a snorkel to go up and down the highway.
no, I'm an anti-snorkel guy.
Yeah, they're pretty. I suppose they're functional in Australia or somewhere out back, but I think they're pretty funny looking.
Or on Fordyce, when you got to cross the river crossings to get to the winch hills, you may need them. But, on most trails, no, not really. So what's next besides just relaxing, enjoying the off-road? You think you'll get into more of the extreme overland auto camping?
That's a good question. I don't know if I'd use the word extreme, but I think that right now my wife and I would like to really enjoy life. We're at that age where we're still healthy enough to get out and do things, but yet we don't want to get to the where we're old enough to where we have a lot of money and we didn't do a bunch of things. We'd like to save some money, obviously, but we want to go enjoy and have fun. So that's going to involve a lot of traveling, not only with family, but meeting family, fun places, and doing fun things that we haven't done before. My wife's a total motorhead and loves all kinds of different racing, so we've been to Vandermeer and watched the drag races. We'll continue to do that. We've gone to several NASCAR races. We're going to do that. Been to several off-road races and supercross races, so we're going to try and catch some of those. We're going to continue to go camping a lot and riding a lot. And what our favorite vacation is to have like 2 4 or 5 day weekends a month. So I'll have to okay that with Watson, but I'm going to take some time off and go have fun.
Excellent. Sounds like a great idea. Around our rock crawling season, we call our off season. That's what we've done with the adventure trailer, owning the magazine, getting out there and creating content or finding content to record. And now we've bought a boat down in on the Third Coast down here in the Gulf Coast. And,
good for you.
It's a nice home office. In fact, that's the name of the boat, is the home office during our off season.
Good for you. Well, I'm going to definitely check out your schedule because I would love to go and spectate a rock crawling event.
Well, we'll have one in I think it's in June up in Rangeley, Colorado, and then we do Cedar City in like May.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely going to hook up with you because I've four-wheeled Rangeley, and all I can say is if you're going to be in Rangeley at their off-road park, you better like the side hill.
So true.
Yeah, that's some tippy stuff up there for sure.
Well, Chris, thank you very much for coming on board and spending some time talking about your history and what you've gone through to get to where you're at. I think it's going to be a good interview, and people are going to hopefully get some great ideas on how to make off-road a lifestyle for them.
Well, I've been very blessed, and I thank the good Lord for all the wonderful opportunities that I've had. And I feel very blessed. I've had just a wonderful life working my hobby. And if anybody is wanting to get into this field, I highly encourage them. Just buckle down, work hard, and you can get paid to work your hobby.
That's right. Find your niche.
Exactly.
Well, Chris, thank you very much, and have a great life, and I hope that everything works out for you, and I hope to see you out on the trail someday or at one of the rock crawls.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and good talking to you, Rich.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.